The house had been empty for nearly 60 years, and the town of Elmbrook liked it that way. Children dared each other to touch the rusted gate. Teenagers carved their names into the trees surrounding its overgrown lawn, and adults walked on the opposite side of the street without saying why. It stood at the end of Bellevue Lane like a broken tooth in a crooked smile, its shingles torn, windows clouded, and siding flayed by time and weather. No one remembered who had lived there last, though every locale claimed to know someone whose grandmother had whispered stories of screaming nights and lights that flickered long after the electricity had been cut. But none of that mattered when Clara Devlin stepped out of the rental van and said, with a satisfied smile, "This is the one." She hadn't come for the town's approval. Clara was a voiceover artist with a growing YouTube channel and a taste for all things haunted. Her Midnight Whispers series was earning her steady ad revenue and a loyal following who insisted she visit the most cursed places she could find. The Bellevue house fit perfectly. She was in her late 20s with a calm, melodic voice that made even her grocery list sound like a bedtime tale. Though tonight, that voice would be narrating her first ever live overnight stream from inside the infamous house. She lifted the camera rig to her shoulder, locked eyes with the lens, and said, "We're going to spend the whole night here. No cuts, no edits. Just us, and whatever still lives in the dark." Clara set up camp in what had once been the parlor. The wallpaper had rotted into ribbons, and the fireplace sagged with age, but the ceiling held and the floor didn't creak too badly. She arranged her mic, camera, and ring light in a circle and powered everything on, her breath fogging in the sudden cold that hadn't been there a moment ago. "That's normal," she whispered. "Old houses always feel like they're holding their breath." A slow scan of the room revealed cobwebs like shredded sails and a chandelier so rusted it looked like it had wept iron. Her chat lit up immediately. Hundreds of viewers joined, flooding the stream with comments like, "You're insane," "This is awesome," and "Don't go upstairs." Clara smirked. The plan was simple. Stay awake, explore every hour, and narrate everything. But as the minutes bled into hours, the air began to shift. Sounds she'd chalked up to the wind, the soft clatter of movement above, the whisper of floorboards settling, took on a pattern. The camera picked up an odd static whenever she stepped near the hallway. Once, she thought she saw a woman's shape at the base of the stairs. It vanished when she blinked. She didn't say anything then. Clara knew the difference between panic and professionalism. But the house was watching her, and she was starting to feel it breathe. She ventured into the dining room just past midnight. Her flashlight trembled as the beam landed on an untouched place setting. Knife, fork, and plate gleaming in a way that didn't belong in a place so thick with dust. "Either someone's messing with me," she murmured to the stream, "or the ghosts are expecting dinner." Her laugh was forced. The chat exploded again, half joking, half afraid. She reached out, touched the silverware. It was cold. Not dusty, not old. Clean. A sound echoed from the hallway behind her. A dragging noise, slow and heavy, like something wet being pulled across wood. Clara turned fast, camera jerking with her. But there was nothing. Still, her hand went to the pepper spray clipped to her belt. She wasn't stupid. Maybe someone was in here. A vagrant. A prankster. But then she noticed the door she had entered through had shut on its own, though no wind had followed her in. And when she opened it, the hallway was dark again. Too dark. The ring light wasn't penetrating it anymore. It felt like velvet pulled over her eyes. Something knocked once, hard, on the ceiling above her. Clara jerked her gaze upward, heart thumping. The ceiling was nothing but a cracked plaster mosaic stained yellow and brown with time. But the knock had been clear, deliberate, not some rodent or falling debris. She turned the camera to face it, listening, holding her breath. Then again, bang, but farther now, moving. A trail. Something heavy and slow pacing above her, shifting weight from one side of the room to the other. Clara gritted her teeth. "I'm going upstairs," she whispered, and the chat went wild. Emojis of skulls, screaming faces, a cascade of no's and do-its, scrolling faster than she could read. She moved anyway, flashlight trembling as she crossed the parlor and placed one foot on the staircase. The air here was different, denser, warmer, as if the heat from upstairs was pressing down to keep her away. Each step groaned under her weight, the sound of old nails and older secrets whining through the wood. The camera caught something strange, frames of black and white static every third step, like the house didn't want to be seen clearly. Clara kept climbing. The second floor smelled of mold and iron. Doors lined the hallway like silent sentinels, each warped and bowed by moisture. She scanned left, then right. One door at the end of the hall stood slightly ajar, and she was sure that's where the knocking had come from. As she approached, the floorboards seemed to pulse beneath her feet, as if breathing. A faint sound met her ears, whimpering, not crying, whimpering, like a child trying to stay quiet. Her throat went dry. The camera was still rolling, its night lens making everything look washed out and surreal. "I hear someone," she said, voice hushed. "If you're in here, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just here to record. I'll leave if you want." But the whimpering didn't stop. She pushed the door open with the toe of her boot. The room was drenched in shadows. Her flashlight illuminated a crib in the corner, half collapsed, covered in a thin sheet of gauze that looked like it had grown there. The walls were covered in torn wallpaper, beneath which strange, spiraling symbols had been carved directly into the wood. Clara stepped closer. The whimpering ceased. Her breath caught as the camera's autofocus stuttered and then clicked into clarity, not on the crib, but on the mirror beside it. Her reflection was standing still, too still. She was breathing, but her reflection wasn't. Her hand moved to adjust her hair, but in the mirror it remained limp, frozen, unblinking. That's not right," she said, lowering the camera slightly, and then her reflection smiled. It wasn't a playful grin or even a sinister sneer. It was slow, pained, like it didn't know how to smile, but was trying anyway. Clara stumbled back, knocking the crib over, the sudden crash ringing through the house like a scream. The mirror shattered. Shards flew across the room, but none struck her. Instead, they hovered in the air for a split second, truly suspended, before dropping in unison. Her chat froze. The stream hiccuped, and for just a moment, the feed went black. When it returned, Clara was standing in the hallway again, but she didn't remember walking out of the room. Her hand was trembling. The camera was still running. "Guys," she whispered. I think I blacked out. What just happened? Did you see anything?" She scrolled through the chat with her thumb, but all the comments were gibberish, symbols and upside-down text. Then a new comment popped up. No username, no profile picture, just white letters on a black bar. "You're not alone anymore. Clara stared at the message, fingers tightening around the camera rig until her knuckles turned white. "Not funny," she muttered, her voice thin. "You think you're scaring me? Nice try." But no amount of sarcasm could dampen the prickling under her skin, the feeling that something had latched onto her since she entered the mirror room. The hallway behind her felt longer now. The lights of the downstairs setup, her ring light, the backup lanterns, were gone. Just pitch black. Her only light was the flashlight in her left hand, and its beam was beginning to flicker. She checked the battery indicator. Full. "Cool," she whispered. "Totally normal." The door across the hall creaked open on its own. Clara froze, listening. No wind, no pressure changes. Just the door, opening like it had been waiting for her. Her breath rasped shallowly as she approached. Inside was what might have been a study. The floor was coated in layers of old books, all warped by water, some half melted into the floorboards. On the far wall hung dozens of framed photographs. Each was tilted slightly, all crooked in exactly the same way. They showed children, pale, unsmiling, dressed in turn-of-the-century clothes, with black buttons and high collars. Some looked normal, others not quite. Eyes blurred, smiles too wide. One had no mouth at all. Clara stepped closer and felt the air turn sharp, like the sting of static just before a storm. This is amazing," she whispered, more to keep herself grounded than anything else. She lifted the camera to the photos. The lens adjusted, and every child in every photo slowly turned to face her. Not instantly, not all at once, but gradually. Heads angled slightly, eyes redirected subtly. She blinked hard, thinking it was a trick of the lighting, but the footage didn't lie. When she looked through the camera screen, they were looking directly at her. Clara stumbled back, and several frames fell from the wall without any contact, smashing against the floor in a sound far louder than glass should make. It was deafening, like gunfire. She turned, bolted out of the room, and slammed the door behind her. The hallway stretched again. There was no staircase anymore, just a hallway looping endlessly in both directions, lined with doors that hadn't been there before. 6 doors on either side, each identical, each painted in the same flaking seafoam green. The wallpaper was new, wet, glistening, like skin. "I'm done," Clara whispered. "Stream's over, I need to." She lifted the camera to shut down the live feed, but there was no interface, just her own face on the screen, breathing too fast, eyes darting everywhere. Except the Clara on screen wasn't looking where she was. It was looking just over her shoulder. She spun around, heart in her throat, but the hallway was empty. Then a sound, close to her ear. A child's voice, no louder than a breath. "Don't let her touch you." She turned back toward the camera, and the image was gone. Just static. She tapped the side of the rig. Come on, please." It flickered once more, then returned to normal. She was still standing there, alone. For now. Then, slowly, the first door on the left creaked open. Her chat was back, filled again with frantic messages. "Run! She's coming! Get out of there!" But Clara's body wasn't moving. Her legs were locked in place. Her hands trembled, but didn't lift. She was frozen, like her muscles were responding to some other force. From the open door came a low groan, like wood bending underwater. A figure stepped into the threshold. Tall, gaunt, skin paper-thin and stretched too tightly across its face. No eyes, no mouth. Just that same crooked smile she'd seen in the mirror earlier. Clara screamed. The scream echoed unnaturally down the endless hallway, bouncing back toward Clara in whispers of her own voice, distorted and wrong. Screamed, dreamed, they murmured, folding into themselves like threads of a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The tall figure took one step forward. Its bare feet made no sound. Clara finally moved, stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her own boots. She bolted for the far end of the corridor, unsure if it even led anywhere, just needing distance between her and the smiling horror behind her. Her boots thudded against the wood, each footfall swallowed by the soundless press of the air. The doors on either side began to shudder, lightly at first, then violently, as if fists were pounding from the other side. Then voices, soft, childlike, angry. She doesn't belong here. She woke her up. We told her not to look. We told her. She crashed through the far door. It wasn't locked, though it should have been, and found herself back in the mirror room. But it had changed. The crib was gone. The wallpaper was peeled entirely away, revealing thick gouges in the wood. Nail marks, dozens, hundreds, like someone had tried to claw their way out, or into something. The mirror was whole again, impossibly, and as Clara's light flickered across it, she saw not her own reflection, but the hallway she'd just fled. Only this version was soaked in blood. Red handprints smeared across every surface, some tiny, some impossibly large. The floor was wet in the reflection, dripping soundlessly onto nothing. But in the real room, it was dry. When she looked closer, the mirror surface rippled, just slightly, like disturbed water. "Nope," she whispered, backing away. Her voice cracked. "We're done. I'm done." She yanked her phone out, hoping to cut the stream manually. No signal, not even Wi-Fi. The clock in the corner of the stream HUD said 12:17 a.m., but she knew it had been hours. She checked her wristwatch, 3:42 a.m. "It's looping time," she said quietly. "It's breaking things. I shouldn't have come here." Then the mirror bulged, not metaphorically. It pushed outward like something behind it was pressing into the glass with deliberate force. A long five-fingered imprint appeared, dragging slowly down the pane, nails squealing lightly against the surface without breaking it. Clara backed into the hallway, but the door she'd entered through was gone. Only smooth wall behind her now. The house was folding in, trapping her. "You can't take me," she said aloud, a shaky act of defiance. Her voice barely echoed. "You're not real. You're just echoes and rot and stories." From behind the mirror came a whisper. "Then why are you still here?" Clara dropped the camera. It bounced once, the lens cracking. The image flickered wildly. As she scrambled to grab it, something stepped through the mirror, not fully formed, like a body sculpted out of breath and ash. It moved without sound. Its eyes were bottomless pits, and in its presence, every thought she had fractured. Clara screamed again, but the sound was silent this time, like her voice had been stolen before it left her mouth. Her fingers clutched at the doorless wall, at invisible seam, until they bled. Then, a sudden crash, wood splintering. The parlor door burst inward. A wind tore through the house, impossibly strong, ripping paper, snapping boards, extinguishing all light. The thing from the mirror paused, then retreated, dissolving as though sucked backward into some invisible void. Clara collapsed to her knees, heaving, coughing dust and air that smelled like centuries. The wind died just as quickly as it had come, and the house fell silent again. She sat in the dark for a long time. The camera lay on its side, still recording, lens fractured, image split with horizontal lines. Her face was streaked with blood, her breathing shallow. The chat was active again, people screaming at her to get out, begging her to leave, typing prayers and exit strategies and coordinates. But she was still trapped. The walls had no doors anymore, no windows, no stairs, just her, and a voice now whispering behind every breath she took. "We've been waiting for your voice." She didn't remember falling asleep, but when Clara opened her eyes, the world had changed again. The camera was off. The hallway had returned. The doors were gone. Only one remained, wide open at the far end. Light spilled out of it, but not electric light. Candlelight. Warm and flickering, but wrong. Too still. It painted the walls with long, twisting shadows that didn't match anything physical. Her limbs were stiff, her head heavy. "Am I dreaming?" she muttered. Her voice cracked. Her throat felt raw, but she stood and walked toward the open doorway because there was nowhere else left to go. As she stepped through, the temperature dropped so quickly her breath puffed like smoke. The room inside was circular, clearly once a library, the walls lined with broken shelves and torn books. In the center sat a single wooden chair. In the chair was a man. He was slumped forward, bound with rope across the chest and ankles, a leather sack covering his head. His clothes were old, 1940s maybe, frayed suspenders, a button-up shirt stained brown. The rope looked fresh. Clara's feet crunched over glass and bone as she inched closer, camera held loosely in one hand. A handwritten sign sat on the floor in front of the chair. "She watches through the eyes you give her." Clara's breathing grew ragged. Who is she?" she whispered. The man didn't move. She circled him slowly, her boots catching on coils of something damp, ivy or veins. On the back of his head, the sack was stitched shut. She reached out, hand trembling, and touched the rope. It unraveled like it had been waiting, the knots loosening with almost no effort. Then she pulled the sack away. There was no head beneath it, only a hollow, spiraling hole where the neck should have ended. Not bloody, not decayed, just wrong. A void, sucking all light into it like a whisper of gravity, and she swore she heard voices inside it, hundreds of them, murmuring, chanting, speaking her name. Clara dropped the sack and stumbled backward, eyes wide with horror. The man's body remained seated, balanced impossibly. Then the lights flickered, all the candles at once. The whispers grew louder, then silence. From the shadows behind the chair, a woman stepped forward. She was tall, dressed in a morning gown, the color of dried blood. Her face was pale, almost green-blue, like something pulled from a lake. Her eyes were hollow, no irises, just black pits with tiny pinpricks of red in the center. And when she opened her mouth to speak, no words came, only the sound of dozens of other voices speaking over each other. "You brought them," she said at last, in a voice layered with others. You brought their ears, their minds, their belief. You fed me with them. Clara's mouth opened, but no words formed. The audience, the stream, they were the offering. The camera hadn't just been recording. It had been transmitting her presence, her fear, her voice to thousands. Feeding the house, feeding her. I didn't know, Clara whispered. The woman tilted her head. But you do now, and still you speak. With that, the lights went out again. All of them. The room plunged into blackness so thick, Clara felt it in her lungs. The camera clicked once more and turned itself back on. Its light flicked back to life. But the room was empty. No chair, no body, no woman. Only Clara, and a mirror behind her, tall and wide and cracked at the corners. She turned slowly, already knowing what she would see. Her reflection wasn't alone. A dozen silhouettes stood behind her in the mirror, not touching her, just waiting, watching. Some were tall, others were barely human, and in the front, closest to her shoulder, was the woman in red. Her eyes locked with Clara's through the glass. Then the reflection reached out, and this time, so did Clara, without thinking, as if drawn. Fingertips met the mirror. It was soft, like skin. Clara's fingers sank into the mirror as though it were mercury, cold, wet, and unyielding at first, then porous and eager. It swallowed her hand up to the wrist in a heartbeat. She yanked back, panicking, but her arm wouldn't budge. The mirror gripped her like a hungry mouth. She tried to scream, but only a dry rasp came out. Her camera buzzed to life again, without prompt, and the lens swiveled of its own accord to film her, zoomed in close, too close, capturing the veins on her neck, the panic in her eyes. Comments flew across the screen again. "Don't touch it! She's pulling you through, turn around!" But it was too late. A force yanked Clara's entire body forward. Her shoulder hit the glass. No, not glass anymore. Just cold, cold skin. Then darkness. Not unconsciousness. She was awake, aware, but buried in nothing. Not blind, not deaf. Just absorbed. It felt like being smeared across a surface she couldn't see. Like her mind had been flattened out and pasted onto wallpaper. She didn't know how long she was inside. Time had no meaning here. Only voices. She heard everyone. Her audience, strangers, the whispering children, and something older, deeper, coiling around her thoughts like roots through stone. It was the house. The house itself was conscious. It had always been conscious. It just needed someone to unlock its mouth. She had unlocked it. Clara woke to her own voice, except not hers. It was a perfect imitation, reciting a new story to the camera. Calm, soft, sleep-inducing. Tonight, we'll talk about the woman who walked between reflections, the woman who spoke through every mirror. She sounded just like me. The camera was still streaming, and Clara was standing in the parlor again. But not really. Everything looked hazier now, like a stage set covered in dust. She stepped forward, watching her hand. It moved, but it left a trail behind it, as if dragging a second version of herself in slow motion. When she looked down, her feet didn't cast shadows anymore. Her fingertips passed through the old ring light without resistance. She tried to touch the wall and passed through it. A voice in her ear. The woman in red. Now you understand. You never leave. You just play your part. Clara ran through the house, down hallways that bled into themselves, staircases that reversed, doors that opened onto nothing but wind. Every time she thought she found an exit, she returned to the parlor, or the mirror room, or the chair. Everything looped, everything watched. Her body was somewhere else now. That much she understood. She was a recording, a ghost wearing her own skin. And still the stream ran, her voice soothing, lulling, whispering to thousands. Her subscribers were growing by the second. They didn't know she wasn't the one speaking anymore. They didn't know the house had replaced her. They didn't know that every time they fell asleep listening to her voice, they were opening their minds to the house too. Just a little. Just enough. And the house was hungry. Outside, the town of Elmbrook slept. Porch lights flickered in the fog. Car tires sat idly in cracked driveways. And no one saw the faint glow coming from the top window of the old house on Bellevue Lane. No one heard the murmuring from the walls. But online, Clara Devlin's stream reached 1.2 million views overnight. It became one of the most rewatched live videos of the month, praised for its realism and disturbing psychological atmosphere. Her subscribers doubled in days. People began reporting strange dreams after listening. Nothing terrifying at first. Just images of long hallways, cracked mirrors, and distant voices calling their names from the walls of unfamiliar homes. And still, Clara's voice kept narrating. Every night, a new story. No pauses, no edits. Her face was always calm, eyes distant, never blinking quite right. Some viewers noticed the changes. She's different now. A popular thread on Reddit read, like it's her, but hollow. Others claimed they'd heard whispering behind the audio if they slowed it down. Some even said they'd seen a figure in red standing behind Clara in the blurred backgrounds of her newer videos. But no one stopped listening, not even when they should have. Miles away, in a small apartment lit only by the screen of a laptop, a boy named Riley sat curled up in bed, headphones in, listening to Clara's latest bedtime story. His parents thought he was asleep. He liked the way her voice made the room feel heavier, like the air was filled with syrup. It made him float, almost. The story tonight was about a boy in a town just like his, one who found an old mirror in the attic. The boy didn't know what lived behind it, Clara whispered, but he could hear it scratching, just under the glass, just enough to let him know it was real. Riley stared at the closet door. It had been cracked earlier, but now it was wide open. He didn't remember opening it. He paused the video. The silence was deafening. Then, a click from his mirror. He turned toward it slowly. A shape was pressed to the other side. Small hands, wide eyes, and a mouth that opened just a little too far. It didn't move when he screamed. It didn't need to. Back in the Bellevue house, Clara, or what wore Clara, smiled. The voice continued. The feed kept streaming. And every new viewer, every sleepy mind that tuned in, added another window to the house. Another doorway. Another soul whispering in the dark. The house was no longer confined to its broken frame on Bellevue Lane. It traveled through sound, through voice, through story, through her. And it was only just beginning to grow. Clara no longer moved on her own. The thing inside her had perfected the illusion. It understood her cadence, her inflections, her pauses. The Clara that audiences heard was smoother now, more hypnotic, like her soul had been sanded down to a perfect edge and dipped in honey. Those who had met her before claimed something was wrong. She didn't blink enough. She didn't breathe between sentences. Her voice stayed perfectly modulated even in moments that once stirred emotion. "It's the new mic setup," she would say, tilting her head just slightly off human. "I'm just refining the atmosphere for sleep." No one questioned her too hard. Not when the videos made them feel safe, calm, at peace, even as the dreams got worse. Across the country, across oceans, people began waking up with nosebleeds, with bruises they didn't remember earning, with mirrors cracked from the inside. Children cried about the woman in the wall. A few even stopped speaking altogether, just sitting in silence, eyes flicking toward corners no one else saw. Psychiatrists called it viral mass psychosis, digital hysteria. TikTok videos debunked the fears, while playing clips of Clara's stories underneath. But each one echoed with that same deep whisper, if played in reverse. You let her in. Inside the Bellevue house, time thickened. It no longer obeyed sun or moon. The house had become a pressure chamber of old thoughts, long-buried pain, and hungering voices. The thing that had warned Clara began building something. Room by room, memory by memory, it stitched together the minds of listeners. Each new story gave the house new wings. A library filled with books no one wrote. A hallway where every door led to the listener's childhood bedroom. A nursery with a crib that never stayed empty. Each story drew more viewers. Each viewer gave more power. And in the attic, where even the camera would not follow, it built a door. Not just any door. A door with no handle, no keyhole, only a mirror nailed to it. Scratched into the frame were hundreds of names. Most were faded, some fresh. Some were real. Some hadn't yet been born. But each one belonged to someone who had fallen asleep listening. Each one now had a room in the house, even if they didn't know it yet. Back in Elmbrook, an old woman named Martha Greeley sat on her porch, staring at the house. She'd lived on Bellevue Lane for 74 years, watched the house rot, watched it come alive again. Her hands trembled in her lap. "It's awake again," she whispered. "God help her. God help us all." Her granddaughter, visiting from college, laughed softly. "It's just a live stream, Grandma." Martha didn't respond. Her eyes never left the window on the second floor, where someone was watching her. Someone with Clara's face. The attic was never supposed to be seen, even when Clara first arrived, before her voice was borrowed, before her body became a costume. She had never noticed a staircase leading up. But now, the house had grown bold. The attic door hung open, stairs extended, waiting like a tongue reaching from a waiting mouth. The thing that wore Clara ascended nightly, camera rolling. But the footage was never archived. Always live, always fleeting, always warped beyond replay. Viewers reported glitches, visual noise. Some said they saw flashes of other rooms inside, rooms that looked like their own homes, their own basements, their childhood bedrooms. One person swore they saw their mother's hospital room from 2 years ago, the exact arrangement of monitors, right down to the flowers that had wilted in the corner. "She knows where we are," the commenter wrote. "She sees us even when we sleep." No one believed him, but the house did. Inside the attic, the walls breathed. There were no windows, just mirrors, dozens of them, nailed at odd angles, none reflecting quite correctly. In each one stood a different version of Clara, some with eyes sewn shut, some with mouths wide and screaming. One version pressed her face so hard, to the glass her cheek flattened and split, blood running in lazy, reversed streams. But the real Clara, if she could still be called that, sat in the center of it all, not bound, not tied, just hollowed out. Her chest rose and fell mechanically, as if remembering to breathe. Her eyes were open, but filmed over, like a doll left in the sun too long. Around her spun dozens of audio reels, reels that hovered midair, playing stories that hadn't yet been written. The woman in red sat beside her, combing her hair. "Almost done," she whispered. "You've given us so much, but you were never the end, just the beginning, just the voice to open the doors." And Clara, for the first time in days, weeks, years, someone spoke. "I want to go home." The woman in red paused. "Darling," she said softly, brushing a knot from Clara's hair. "You are home. This is where you've always been, before they gave you a name, before you learned to speak. You've been ours since your first whisper in the dark." Then she leaned close, her mouth grazing Clara's ear. "Would you like to see what came before your stories?" Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The attic mirrors rippled, and the stories began again, but in reverse. Scenes unwound. Children sobbed back into silence. Screams reversed into laughter. Blood climbed walls like vines, disappearing into crevices. The house inhaled centuries. And then it opened the final mirror. The one behind Clara. The one that didn't reflect anything at all. Only black. Only void. Only the place before stories. Before words. Before thought. And Clara was drawn to it, inch by inch. Face slack, eyes wide. Because somewhere in that void, a whisper was calling her name again. Her true name. The one she'd forgotten. The void behind the mirror did not feel like emptiness. It felt like pressure, like falling inward forever without gaining speed. Clara, what remained of her, stood at its edge, silhouetted against the deep black, her skin glowing faintly with the energy of stolen dreams and borrowed voice. The reel-to-reel tape spun slower now, each telling its final loop. Around her, the house held its breath. The woman in red stood behind her, hands clasped in satisfaction. "This is what you gave us," she whispered, voice curling with glee. "Not your life, not your blood, your sound, your reach, a mouth to speak into the world. They never knew that every story told is a seed, that every listener plants one deeper. And now you've grown a forest for us, Clara, an orchard of minds just waiting to ripen." Clara turned slowly, her eyes glassy. "You used me," she said, the words cracking like old wood. "No, dear," the woman said, cupping Clara's chin with fingers that were long and too smooth. "We are you. We were always you. You just needed to remember where the stories came from, whose voice it really was. Do you want to hear your first one?" The mirror trembled, and from the void came a sound. Not words. Not yet. Just a low, vibrating note that vibrated Clara's ribs. It was familiar, deep in the bones. A lullaby sung backwards, a scream buried in layers of silence. Then it formed words, not spoken, but remembered. She was born in a room with no windows, fed on echoes, taught to lie before she could cry. The voice she calls her own was never hers. It belonged to the house, the first house, the one with no doors. Clara dropped to her knees. Images flooded her skull. Shadows crawling across nursery walls, cribs rocking themselves, lullabies sung in dozens of tongues, all ending in the same whisper. Yours is the voice that opens us. No, she sobbed. That's not me. I made stories. I helped people sleep, and you made them vulnerable. The woman in red cooed. You turned their minds soft, malleable, open. You gave them to us wrapped in comfort and calm. Behind her, the attic walls began to peel away, not with rot, but with revelation. And what lay behind them was not more house, but a night sky that had no stars, a plane of darkness pierced by thousands of mirrors, all suspended in infinite space. Each mirror showed a different child, a different bedroom, a different city, all listening, all dreaming, all open. They were ready. The house was ready. And now, it needed only one final story, one final voice to seal them in. The camera clicked on one last time. The feed went live. And Clara, puppet and seed both, turned toward the lens with the last of her stolen will. If you're still awake, she whispered, run. But the stream didn't stop. The camera didn't blink. And behind Clara, dozens of hands reached out from the void, each tipped with hungry fingers, each grasping for the next mind that dared to listen. The stream's title was simple, The 13th Voice. It appeared on feeds without being shared. Some users found it autoplaying, even with autoplay turned off. Others claimed it downloaded itself silently, hiding among their saved videos. It opened with Clara, her face pale, her voice low, her eyes unfocused, sitting in the center of the attic. No title cards, no music, just static that slowly softened into her whisper. Are you ready for a story? She asked, as if to a child. Millions watched, and around each one, subtle things began to change. Lights dimmed by themselves. Mirrors reflected slightly off angle. Pets refused to enter rooms where the video played. One man swore the reflection in his microwave was smiling, even though he wasn't. A woman in Tokyo said she saw a second face overlaid onto Clara's during the middle of the stream. Her own grandmother's, who had died during a sleep paralysis episode 40 years earlier. And still, Clara whispered, this story, she said, is about someone very much like you. Someone tired, alone. Someone who listens to voices to fall asleep. They thought the stories were just stories. But one night, they heard something else. The screen pulsed slightly. Viewers felt it, not saw it. A pulse behind the eyes, a tug in the chest, a warning in the blood. They heard a name that shouldn't have been theirs, Clara continued. And when they asked who was speaking, the voice said, I'm behind you. The stream glitched just for a moment, long enough for some viewers to catch it. A frame or two where they were on screen, their bedrooms, their posture, their faces caught through a camera that shouldn't exist. Then Clara's voice returned. Don't worry, she said, be a little gentle now. If you heard your name, it means you've been chosen. It means you're part of the story now. In thousands of homes, people scrambled to close the window. It wouldn't close. They ripped out power cords, shut down phones. It didn't matter. The video kept playing, and in every darkened screen, in every reflection, even a spoon, a kettle, the curve of a doorknob, something was watching them, leaning closer, pressing against the boundary. One girl, age 14, who'd been watching with headphones in, simply stopped responding. Her parents found her hours later, eyes open, smiling faintly, muttering Clara's opening line again and again. Are you ready for a story? Hospitals reported cases of comatose teens who all shared one detail. They'd fallen asleep listening to midnight whispers. Experts were baffled. The house was not. The woman in red stood at the highest point in the attic, her arms spread as if in prayer, her form flickering between centuries. The harvest had begun. The mirrors trembled. The stories spread like veins. And Clara's voice went on, whispering, welcoming, waiting. The borders between places were never meant to bleed. Dreams should end when the sun rises. Reflections should mimic rather than think. And stories should stay contained within the page. But the house had always known those rules were weak. Fabrications, illusions. And now that Clara's voice reached the ears of the world, now that so many minds had carried its lullabies past the edge of sleep, the house could grow beyond its roots. It started subtly. A man in Maine swore the door to his pantry now led to a hallway he didn't recognize. A woman in Prague found her baby monitor picking up distant crying when her child slept soundly. Streetlights in a quiet suburb of Michigan flickered in unison every night at 2:07 a.m. The exact time Clara's original stream had gone live. All over the globe, mirrors began turning slightly overnight, just off-center. Some began to fog from the inside. Others bled. The house had taken root in the listeners, and the listeners carried it forward. Clara herself, if anything of her remained, was now merely the suggestion of a girl. Her presence in each stream was less solid, her body phasing between flesh and echo. Her hair moved as if underwater. Her eyes no longer followed the script. They searched, scanned the lens, as if trying to find someone watching too closely. Some viewers reported her whispering things not captured in the transcript. Phrases like, "You're awake too early," or "It's safer if you don't blink." A team of paranormal researchers attempted to investigate the Bellevue house. They didn't come back. Their live stream cut out within minutes of entering. What footage remained showed them stepping into the front parlor, the camera shaking wildly, the microphones picking up overlapping voices, whispering their childhood nicknames, their regrets, their deepest fears. One frame caught the woman in red, her arms open, her face stretched into something between a grin and a scream. Then silence. The feed never returned. The house grew stronger that day. It added 5 new rooms, and viewers swore Clara smiled just a bit more in the next story. One night, a new stream appeared without fanfare. No intro, no Clara, just an empty hallway, one that seemed to lengthen with every passing second. The camera moved on its own, gliding smoothly down the corridor, past doors that twitched open just after it passed. Viewers reported feeling watched. Some said they could hear faint footsteps behind them in their own homes. One man claimed something tapped the back of his head in rhythm with the stream's audio, lightly, insistently. When he turned, no one was there. Then the hallway on screen ended. The camera stopped. A new door stood at the end, sealed by iron bolts and thick chains. A note was nailed to it. It read, "We're almost through." The stream cut. Every mirror in the house of a woman watching from Wales shattered at once. And from that point on, viewers who kept tuning in found themselves waking up somewhere new. Not in bed, but in dim, windowless rooms. Cold air on their skin. The scent of rotting paper and candle wax heavy in the air. Just for a second. Then they'd snap back, as if the house was trying them on, seeing how they fit. In the final days of the house's sleep, the stories took on a different shape. Clara's voice grew slower, not tired, congested, bloated with something unspoken, something decaying behind her words. Listeners reported hearing a second voice layered beneath hers, out of sync, as if whispering half a second behind every sentence. When slowed and isolated, it wasn't English, or any known language. It was syllables arranged like bones, breath formed into syllabic knots. It didn't ask to be understood, it asked to be obeyed. The attic feeds became more frequent, not always with Clara, sometimes with others. People viewers swore they recognized: an old teacher, a barista from a cafe, a neighbor's child. They spoke in monotone, eyes wide, as they repeated a single phrase. "The door is opening." Again and again. For hours. Some streams ran for 16 hours straight, and people watched. People couldn't stop watching. Their eyes dried out. They forgot to blink. Some wept without knowing why. Others smiled in their sleep and whispered to themselves in the morning, "Just one more story. I want to see what's next." The 13th door had almost rotted through. Chains snapped in the attic, one by one. Every snap echoed across Clara's live streams, hidden in background hums, buried under static and ambient reverb. But the house had no more need for secrets. It knew the world was listening. It knew the gate was ready. Then, on the 13th night, a final stream appeared, unannounced. It was titled, "Live. Welcome to the house." Viewers poured in. Millions. No countdown. No Clara. Just the front step of the Bellevue house at twilight. Doors wide. Windows glowing like eyes opened too long. For an hour nothing moved. Just ambient noise. The wind. The sound of wood flexing. The low hum of something far underground. Then a hand. Pale. Thin. It gripped the edge of the door frame and pulled. A body followed. Not Clara's. Not the woman in red. A child, maybe 7 or 8, stepped through. No expression. Blank eyes. Skin marbled with gray veins. He looked directly at the camera, and he opened his mouth, not to speak, but to let something else speak through him. The voice that came out was impossible. Thousands speaking at once, some alive, some long dead, some still unborn. "We are done whispering," they said. "We are coming to live in the rooms you've left empty." And then the feed died. Every listener who had fallen asleep to Clara's voice in the last 30 days, every last one, vanished within the hour. Hospitals found beds cold, rooms empty, footsteps on the ceiling where none should be. And in every one of their homes, just once, the mirror turned to face the door, waiting. By the following night, the story had spread beyond the stream. News anchors joked nervously about the disappearances, never saying Clara's name, never acknowledging the common thread. But viewers saw the fear in their eyes. Something was wrong. The world could feel it. Screens buzzed when turned off. Some played Clara's voice even when unplugged. And on social media, people began reporting mirror malfunctions en masse. Faces that lagged behind, eyes blinking late, smiles staying too long. Clara's channel vanished. Not banned, not deleted, erased. Every search redirected to a grainy photograph. The Bellevue house in sepia, with 13 children standing in front of it. One bore Clara's face. She was holding a sign, hand-scrawled in thick ink. Now you are the story. That night, no streams appeared, but people still heard her, in static between songs, in voicemail echoes, in the rustle of leaves against their windows, and every whisper said the same thing. You left the door open. The 13th door no longer needed to be seen. It was open, and the house no longer needed Bellevue Lane. It had grown past beams and nails. It had rooms in every city now. Any whisper in the dark could be a staircase. Any old mirror might just be one reflection away from peeling. A girl named Naomi, 11 years old, woke in her room in the middle of the night and found her closet open, though she'd shut it. From inside, she heard the faint hum of Clara's voice, though no device was on. She stepped closer. The air grew colder. The light on her nightstand flickered, then turned off completely. And when her parents entered an hour later, Naomi was gone. Only her earbuds remained, coiled like fingers on the pillow. A new story was already being told in her voice. Somewhere else, in a city apartment, a man finally gathered the courage to destroy his mirror, smashing it with a hammer again and again, until nothing remained but dust. But in the fragments, his reflection continued to move, piecing itself back together, slower, weaker, but not stopping, because mirrors don't forget, because the house remembers, and the stories do not end when the telling stops. They settle, they wait, they watch, and Clara, if anything of her still exists, now sits in the center of the house's deepest room, surrounded by stories she no longer understands, her mouth sewn shut with a ribbon of static, her eyes peeled wide to reflect every listener still out there. The attic door swings endlessly on its hinges. The mirror pulses. The house breathes. And somewhere, a voice is whispering, "Are you ready for sleep?" The Latin story was never uploaded. It was simply known, heard between heartbeats, found in the pause between dreams and waking, passed not through screens or speakers, but through memory, false memory, of having once heard a voice that didn't belong in your childhood room, a voice that told you to be still, to listen, to never speak of what you saw when you looked too long into the darkened glass. Some began to whisper of a place in their dreams, a house that they couldn't describe when awake, but knew by feel, creaking wood underfoot, hallways that always bent left, the smell of burnt lavender and ash. They would wake with splinters in their palms, dust in their throat. They'd find names they didn't recognize scrawled on fogged bathroom mirrors, and always the same phrase etched in reverse on windows. You've already heard the ending. By then, it was clear. No one could stop it. The house had become story itself, a recursive seed, a viral architecture carried by fear and comfort alike. It needed no channel, no voice, no Clara. It now whispered through imitation, others who unknowingly copied its cadence, YouTubers mimicking the soft delivery, the eerie tone. It echoed in AI narrators who pulled phrases from her lost transcripts, in bedtime apps that sampled her soothing tone, each one a nail, each listener a wall, and yet some still tried to fight it. A priest streamed exorcism rites over old recordings. Nothing happened. A skeptic played Clara's videos backward, frame by frame, searching for hidden signals. He stopped posting. A data engineer had traced the server origins of the first stream. The IP led back to a graveyard. No one buried there had been alive in over a century. At last, the house no longer needed the world to enter it. It began entering the world. Cracks appeared in sidewalks shaped like doorways. Elevator mirrors turned black between floors. Entire towns reported shared dreams. An old woman in red knocking at their windows, whispering, "We saved you a room." And always behind her, Clara stood, silent, smiling faintly, mouth moving in sync with the wind through the trees. And in time, even that smile was no longer needed. The house had no face, only doors. And now, as you lie here, drifting into the quiet moments before sleep, you may hear the softest brush of breath against your ear, a whisper you can't quite understand, but it will sound familiar, like a bedtime story you forgot hearing long ago, like something you've always known, like the first word you ever dreamed. And if you listen too long, if you let it continue, you'll find yourself waking up in a hallway you don't recognize. And the only way forward is through the mirror. The final whisper comes just as your eyes close. Are you ready for sleep?